I know I've said this before on weeks like this, but I really appreciate these weeks where we kind of have our regulars all here. We have no extra blessings or birthday. I'm sure there are birthdays of people who didn't speak up, but no extra birthdays or anniversaries. The celebrations are fun, but it's really wonderful to have this group here together and just get to pray and learn. So thank you. A comment about what the Torah that we're going to be learning. I know that this topic that we're about to talk about is very personal, maybe even a little triggering for some people in this room. And I'm going to invite you today to stay here with me, right, to learn this Torah together, because I do believe, especially in the time that we're in, and the people, especially with the people that I know we have in this community, the family and friends that we have, this Torah is really important for us to learn to dive into together. Now, earlier this year, the state of Kansas passed SB 244, invalidating any driver's license or birth certificate that indicates a different sex than the one documented at birth. The bill also mandates that in government buildings, individuals use the public bathroom that matches the sex documented at birth, even if they work there. These laws extend to those who have already gone through the process of changing their names and changing their legal sex, invalidating their ability to drive, to vote, to gain employment, to do anything requiring an ID. For so many in this room, we have friends and family who have transitioned, are questioning their gender, or do not fit neatly into the category of male or female. For many in our community, for some in our community too, they identify as transgender or as gender non-binary as well. So many of us already know the impacts of the limits on transgender rights that exist in Texas, especially in healthcare, especially for our youth, but also as a part of our institutional culture and policy. We know the impact that these restrictions can have on the tangible everyday lives of people who are trying to figure out how to be their most authentic, productive, compassionate selves. I am proud to say that at least since 2003, with Rabbi Meir E. Rabinowitz's Teshuvah, the status of transsexuals, our conservative movement has recognized the fluidity of gender, the real psychological need for some to transition, and the obligation that we have to respect those who make that choice. Our movement more clearly defined that support with its Teshuvah explaining how to define gender when a definition is called for in Jewish law or halakha, with Rabbi and medical doctor Leonard A. Scharzer's Transgender Jews and Halakha. Time and time again, our movement highlights its support with resolutions like the one made in January, with a list of basic human rights that transgender individuals deserve, along with all of us, and a conclusion that called for encouragement of its members, that's us, to, quote, affirm, welcome, and support transgender and other queer individuals in our institutions, communities, and beyond, and advocate for policies and take other measures that uphold the fundamental rights and inviolable dignity of transgender and other queer individuals locally, statewide, nationally, and beyond. Our congregation, Beth Torah, also has a history of trying our best to create safe spaces for guests and community members of all gender identities. As a community that takes both our culture of welcoming and our culture of learning seriously, what do we do then when we come across a verse like the one that we encountered in today's reading? Lo yihiech li gever al isha velo yilbash gever simlat isha. Ki toavat Adonai Elohecha kol osei ele. A man's apparel shall not be on a woman, and a man shall not wear the clothing of a woman. And here's where the translation will get interesting. Ki, for, or when, or because, all who do these are an abomination of Adonai, your God. Our Torahitic verse has been used casually to define how even those who are comfortable with the gender identity they've held since birth should dress. It has been used to define who should and should not wear ritual garments like talit, tefillin, and kippah. And as kli in Hebrew is not just a garment but also an implement, especially when we're talking about war, it has been used as an argument against mixed genders in battle or even against women fighting in battle at all. Most pressing to where we find ourselves in historical time, this verse is often used as an argument against a person assigned a particular gender at birth, transitioning their gender identity, or even their physical appearance. As a first step to reading our verse, I think it is crucial for us to understand that when a person transitions their gender, it is not them putting on the clothes of a different gender, but it's them taking on the identity that they've held for a long time, for many, for decades. Them having the courage to step forward and to call themselves by the name they know they need to have, that they've had perhaps all of their lives. If we step into some traditional text, some traditional commentaries on our text, I find Rashi's an interesting one to go to. He quotes from a much earlier midrash, and he reads our verse not as because or for all those who do this are an abomination of Adonai your God, but rather Rashi, who's writing in the 12th century, says this is when all who do these actions are an abomination to God. He says quite clearly, Lo asra Torah ele levush hamevi lidei toiva. The Torah only forbids this action when such clothing brings the wearer to toiva, or to an act that is abominable. Right? Dressing differently than the gender that society may assign, right, is only a problem, Rashi says, if it is for harmful reasons. Our other medieval commentators bring up examples of this, right? Disguised for the sake of seduction or of adultery. For those of us who enjoy loving relationships with those who make the choice to explore or change their gender identity, even for those of us who disagree with that exploration, we would be hard-pressed to find some sort of reason why that exploration or change has taken place that would be harmful or oppressive to others. Much more often, that exploration or change leads to a confidence that allows that person a deeper embrace of compassionate community, of gemilut chasadim, right, of pursuing their mitzvot. Beyond our verse and the interpretations of it, our ancient Talmud presents a multitude of categories of those who do not fit our traditional male and female binary. As we are in an embodied Torah, as we use an embodied Torah, when our rabbis speak about these identities, the tumtum, androgynous, and ailonit, as they're called in Talmud, it is not out of judgment or shame, but it's rather in order to figure out how they might best be seen as obligated or exempt with regard to certain mitzvot. Even 2,000 years ago, it was clear that gender is not always as straightforward as how one physically appears, especially of how one physically appears when they're born. Especially today, our Jewish commitment to supporting and protecting our transgender family, friends, and community members is crucial, not just because of our personal relationships or because of a sense of the right thing to do, but because that protection is embedded in our Torah. It's embedded in our textual tradition. We can look first as the quote that we often return to on this bima, right? Kol Yisrael arevim ze bazeh, that all of Israel is intertwined with one another. As I've stated already, so many of us know people, family and friends. There's only 1 or 2 degrees of separation between us and someone who is really grappling with their gender identity or who has already done that grappling and who knows who they are, who have made that transition. And all of us in this Jewish community are responsible for and intertwined with one another. We're responsible for that care of each other, of making sure that our well-being is taken care of. We know with Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh that the well-being of my neighbor, of my friend, directly corresponds to my well-being as well. We also have the Torah of Kavod HaBriot, which is quite simple. Kavod HaBriot means respect of creation, respect of the person in front of us made in the image of God. It's not Kavod HaBriot except for when I disagree with that person. It's Kavod HaBriot regardless of what I perceive about the decisions that they've made. It's Kavod HaBriot because I know that this person in front of me has that spark of God within them. At the very simplest level, we are obligated to love, we are obligated to respect and care for one another, right? And as members of this community that for 52 years now, 52, 53 almost years now, right, has prided ourselves on welcoming participation, egalitarianism, right, inclusion, we're very good at that, respecting and caring for one another. We're very good at, for every person who walks into our doors, balancing a gentle curiosity with a strong embrace, of asking the questions and of being open to who this person is in front of us. At the very simplest level, right, we open ourselves to be present with the person in front of us. And even though I say it's simple, I know that that can be hard sometimes too. Right? And that can include too, or that should include too, right, calling people by the names that they ask to be called by, using the pronouns they ask to be called. Right? That there's not a whole lot in that that's too difficult. We might mess up and we can have grace too, but that's a way to respect that person, to love the other as we would love ourselves, to call them the name that they would like to be called, just as we would like to be called our own name. And also, when we find ourselves in, let's say, a workplace or an organization where we have some sort of say over what our space looks like, it is our obligation, too, to make sure that there are private spaces present where people can change, where people can use the restroom with dignity, where people can take a break, can take a breath. We have that in our Shalom space, and I would hope, too, that in the various organizations we volunteer for, in the various workplaces we have, too, that those are spaces we create wherever we go. And beyond that, I know that there are lots of people in this community who are involved in advocacy, and I would reach out, I would ask the questions to the people on your Kiddush lunch table who might know who are our officials who we should be reaching out to, what are the elections that we should be looking forward to, that we should be paying attention to. I'm proud to be a part of a community that engages in that advocacy, right? And as I know, too, right, advocacy on lots of different sides of the social and political spectrum. I want to return back to our verse, to our Torah, as I often hear, or I shouldn't say often, but I sometimes hear, right, the very real feedback that, well, Rabbi, when you address Torah that sometimes makes you uncomfortable, right, you also need to explain, right, why that Torah is important, why that Torah should be in our Torah. We know that it's passed down from God to Moses to the Jewish people. So what's holy about that verse? So returning to our verse, right, Lo yihye chli gever al isha, v'lo yilbash gever simlat isha, ki toavat Adonai Elohecha kol osei ele. A man's apparel shall not be on a woman, and a man shall not wear the clothing of a woman. For all who do these are an abomination of Adonai, your God. From our perspective today, knowing the people in our community who make the choices they do, to be their best selves, to embrace the genders they know they are, we can see this as a command, right, for a person to embody the gender that they need to be, right, the gender that they know they are. And even if we want to say, okay, that's too modern of an interpretation, if we want to step back, right, we can return to what I mentioned with Ben Sorer Umoreh a little bit earlier this morning. When we learn Ben Sorer Umoreh, and as I mentioned earlier, this idea of the stubborn and rebellious son, right, our rabbis go through the definition of the stubborn and rebellious son. If we recall in our Torah reading, there was that commandment that if you have a stubborn and rebellious son, right, after a couple of steps, right, you go out and you stone the stubborn and rebellious son. And our rabbis of the Talmud are like, I don't think that that's the whole picture. Right? Our Torah is divine. I don't think that's the whole picture. And so they go through all of the different stipulations to this stubborn and rebellious son, and they ask the question, well, if we're adding all of these stipulations, then the stubborn and rebellious son, then that story, right, doesn't actually exist. So why do we learn it? We learn it so that we can go out and learn. And so I want to return to our verse and say one of the reasons, certainly not the only reason, but one of the reasons why it's so important that we have this verse in our Torah is so that on a day like today, we can dive in, that we can say ulmad, that we can go and that we can learn, and we can remind ourselves of our responsibility, of the mitzvot that we are obligated to take on as a Jewish people and as a community that's dedicated to that egalitarianism, to that welcoming, that participation, to that inclusion. So thank you for being that community that teaches those values time and time again. Shabbat Shalom.